also pointed to the fact that government's
All right, so we are carrying you, the budget presentation by the finance minister, and I hope that you are appreciating, the dialogue. We'll have some comments on that later on when Harry joins us. We'll break it down for you a little bit more. But it's interesting that we get this information, that we understand what is happening in our country, especially if we're going to understand government policies and programs. So I hope you are enjoying it. Grab a cup of tea, a cup of juice, and of course, tap and share the screen. Please also remember that we depend on your contributions to keep the program going. So my moderator is available. We can't do a lot of asking. So if we don't ask, don't think it's because we don't need. Please send your contributions to the Zelle or the Cash App, e-transfer in Canada. By the way, Kay Henriquez, how you doing? And gift the program as much as you can, because it does help with the algorithm. It's if even one rose, send it to the program, because we need to grow the platform. All right, let's get back to the finance minister.
Construction activities have not revved up yet, and so the inflation, as measured by the GDP deflator, could not be as high as estimated. I want to call the Commissioner's attention to the fact that there is a lot of reconstruction activities happening all over Jamaica on the part of businesses and private people.
All right, Cassandra B., my moderator, Caroline.
Neighbor.
See Cassandra asking for some information there. You could just give it to her for me, please. Thanks.
Okay, no problem.
Madam Speaker, the bottom line is CPI and GDP deflator are related, but not the same thing. In normal times, they track closely, and there's little difference. However, in the aftermath of an event like a Category 5 hurricane, where domestic production in certain areas has been decimated with scarcity influencing price of locally produced goods, and there's a surge in demand for reconstruction from citizens and businesses, we can have a wider than usual variance between CPI and the GDP deflator. It is not abnormal or suspicious. Madam Speaker, I also want to acknowledge the Commissioner's more pointed concern, and I will be candid about it. He's right that government's reconstruction activity in Jamaica has historically been delayed. He's right that capital underspending at the level of government is an issue. But Madam Speaker, if our GDP deflator projection rests entirely on government-executed reconstruction, I would be standing here on weaker ground, but it does not. The primary driver of near-term reconstruction price pressure will be the private sector by way of insurance-financed hotel refurbishment, household rebuilding, and foreign direct investment in damaged commercial infrastructure. That activity does not pass through our procurement system, and it will not wait. That activity, Madam Speaker, for those who travel the length and breadth of Jamaica, they will see that activity in full bloom all over Jamaica. Madam Speaker, these two measures, CPI, which is a consumer price index, and GDP deflator, are related, but fundamentally distinct measures, and conflating them would itself be an error. Madam Speaker, with that as a backdrop, I turn now to the central government's budget. The central government's budget for fiscal year 2026-27 for recurrent and capital spending plus debt service, which includes interest payment and debt amortization, meaning we're paying back the debt, is $1,441,780,000,000.
That's a debt. That's a debt. Imagine that, eh? 1,441,781,354,000. Understand? See why we have to grow the GDP? That's a debt. 1,444,781,354,000.
$1,354,000. Madam Speaker, the summary components of the expenditure budget are outlined on page 1 to 4 of the estimates of expenditure 2026-27 for the financial year ending 31st March 2027. Further details are in its many pages, which underwent robust interrogation at the 2 marathon sessions of the Standing Finance.
I think I may have misled you. Yeah, the government's budget. Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, sure.
Committee in this Parliament last week, Thursday and Friday. But Madam Speaker, I'm specifically highlighting Jamaica's estimates of expenditure book to help our students know where to find this information. It is on the website of the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service. And just for information to our students, in the same estimates of expenditure book, you'll also find the expenditure data for the past fiscal years, as well as the future fiscal years beyond fiscal year 2026-27, because we have to put forward projections or estimates for the fiscal years that make up the medium term, which goes to fiscal year 2029-30. Madam Speaker, of significance, the expenditure for the fiscal year we're ending includes $67 billion of Hurricane Melissa spending. $67 billion, Madam Speaker, of which $24.1 billion was the loan to JPS to accelerate the return of electricity. The cabinet, led by the Prime Minister, is to be commended for this historic decision. I thank all who were involved in the process, the Financial Secretary of the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service, the Attorney General's Office, Minister Vaz and his team, for the late nights and weekend work they did to hammer out an agreement with JPS. Madam Speaker, this was a consequential decision. The Hurricane Melissa spend included $3.39 billion that went to Ministry of Tourism to support recovery of the tourism sector. The Development Bank of Jamaica received $3 billion for the M5 Business Recovery Program intended to accelerate Jamaica's economic recovery and strengthen resilience. Ministry of Water, Environment, Climate Change was allocated $3.25 billion to support NWC. Ministry of Labor and Social Security was allocated $11.2 billion, of which $10 billion was the grant to households under the Restoration of Owner or Occupant Family Shelter Program roofs to persons affected. There was also $155 million cash transfer for PATH recipients and $32 million for children with disability impacted by the hurricane. The Ministry of Education, Skills, Youth and Information was allocated $2.3 billion, Madam Speaker, to include $1 million to each of the 616 schools identified. The Ministry of Health and Wellness was allocated 2.3 billion for relief and recovery. The Ministry of Agriculture received 3 billion for relief and.
All right, so let us play that out and get back to the minister. We're carrying you some of the minister's budget presentation she delivered in Parliament today. I hope you're finding it interesting. You're learning some things. We are all learning. Let's go back to the minister.
Departments and agencies. Ministry of Local Government and Community Development was
This is from PBCJ. 91 people were watching today. 91.
allocated $4.6 billion.
And that's interesting, you know, because why I tell you, I don't know what the government is going to do to get people more interested in these presentations. Very interesting.
For NSWMA pre and post hurricane cleanup, central government support to municipal corporations, and ODPEM post relief efforts. Madam Speaker, there were some smaller amounts that are worth mentioning because of what they are going to do or what they have done. There was approximately in the budget, outside of, included in the budget, Madam Speaker. These are non-hurricane work that government must do in order to help government to work better. And there was 19 million for the backlog audit project, which is aimed at reducing the number of unaudited financial statements prepared by municipal corporations, some statutory bodies, executive agencies, and some internationally funded projects, as well as the annual appropriation accounts of ministries and departments. The Office of the Children's Advocate received 121 million for relocation. So did the Office of the Independent Commission of Investigations, 372 million. 1.86 billion for implementation for NITS, 1.5 billion for Rural Economic Development Initiative 2, 225 million for Integrated Community Development Project 2, 150 million for strengthening cybersecurity in Jamaica, to include expanding the pool of specialized cybersecurity professionals, 5.5 billion for maintenance of secondary roads, 760 million for the Hope Housing, and 50.3 billion for payment of pensions. Madam Speaker, on the other side of the ledger, the projected revenues and grants for the national budget is 1,083,532,300,000. This includes the revenue measures and the 11.4 billion from the NHT. These revenue measures, Madam Speaker, were announced in February when I tabled the fiscal policy papers and budget documents in Parliament, and I will speak more on these. Madam Speaker, I want to start with a special focus on MSMEs. This government remains committed to ensuring that micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises benefit meaningfully from public procurement opportunities. Through collaboration, the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service and the Public Procurement Commission, we're strengthening support for small businesses seeking to participate in government procurement. The Commission, the Public Procurement Commission, has already begun engaging the MSMEs to guide their members through the supplier registration process. A series of targeted engagements will continue to assist entrepreneurs in completing registration and understanding how to compete effectively for government contracts. In the upcoming financial year, we will also advance the implementation of the public procurement set aside allows portion of government procurement to be reserved for Jamaican suppliers, including micro and small enterprises. In partnership, Madam Speaker, with the Public Procurement Commission, we will establish and maintain a verified list of qualifying MSME suppliers to enable procuring entities to easily identify eligible businesses when applying the set-asides provisions. Once the system is operational, the Ministry will issue a renewed directive to public bodies mandating utilization of the set-aside order with special emphasis on micro-enterprises with annual turnover below $15 million and small enterprises with turnover between 15 million and 75 million. At the same time, Madam Speaker, we will continue working with the Public Procurement Commission to simplify and streamline the supplier registration system so that businesses can more easily enter the public procurement market. These initiatives will ensure that government procurement not only delivers value for money, but also serves as a powerful tool for inclusive economic growth by opening more opportunities for Jamaican entrepreneurs to supply goods and services to the government. It was never repealed, but the systems mentioned in the government circular are not operational. Now that the Public Procurement Commission maintains a registry, I've already discussed with them taking over the role of verifying qualifying suppliers and maintaining the list of qualified MSMEs. There will, however, be a need for some website software changes, and the PPC will likely need some additional budgetary support to execute the changes. Madam Speaker, it is possible to get done in this new fiscal year. I know the PPC will need some support, and I am committed. Once the system is modified, a new circular will be issued focused on micro and small enterprises. Madam Speaker, the Public Procurement Set-Asides Order 2019 defines a medium enterprise as having a turnover of between 75 million and 425 million. A micro enterprise is having a turnover of less than 15 million and small enterprises between 15 million to 75 million. I wholeheartedly believe we need to give plenty of hand-holding assistance to entities with turnover below $75 million to help them to navigate the complexities of the government's procurement system. The good news is no amendments are needed to the Act. It is the operationalization of the Act and regulations to which we must attend with haste. The SMEs can wait no longer. Madam Speaker, I turn now to the financial sector. Looking forward, Madam Speaker, reconstruction and growth will require the collective efforts of all of us as citizens, as businesses, government, but especially the financial sector. I want to pause just to commend Jamaicans, especially the farmers and Minister Green. When you look across the economy, the farmers are doing their part. They did not sit around lamenting that boy in July of 2024, Beryl
Please keep tapping and sharing,
Tropical
please.
Storm Rafael in October of the same year, lashed me with rain, can't done, and by the time we plant up and start reaping again, bam, a Category 5 hurricane in October. No, our farmers got up and they ran back into the fields to start planting again.
Tomatoes at $25 in the Coronation Market. Cabbage, my God, if you see cabbage at Coronation Market and lettuce and pak choy, yeah, fantastic. The farmers have been very, very responsive. Little problem with the marketing of their produce, but that's for another discussion. Yeah?
JPS
Carol,
did its part to get electricity back within 5 months. Thank you, JPS, and your team. Thank you, Minister Vaz. Madam Speaker, the telecom providers ran as fast as they could as well to get connectivity back in the badly. Thank you, telecom providers. We often cuss you when our calls are not going through and our phone screens are only saying connecting, connecting, connecting. So when you do something well, we need to commend you. I want to thank Minister Samuda and the NWC crew. Another entity that Jamaicans often have choice words for when they dig up the road. But this time, I want to say thank you, NWC. You worked tirelessly to have water back to the damaged parishes. Of course, first out of the blocks was the NWA, the JDF, and the JCF. And a big thank you must go to our Prime Minister. It must go to Minister Morgan as well. Dr. Hunter and team from NWA, Commissioner Blake and the many members of the JCF, Commander Wims Gorman and the dedicated women and men of the JDF and ODPEM. Madam Speaker, all across Jamaica, we can see evidence of green shoots. We know that our Jamaican people, our industries, our international partners, our government are working on restoration, recovery, and growth. Madam Speaker, I've entitled this portion of my speech that's focused.
green shoot. Everywhere across Jamaica is green shoot. I wonder what the finance minister is talking about. But Jamaica gone green? Wow.
On the financial sector, unlocking capital for industry. For the insurance sector, Madam Speaker, there's a comprehensive framework. And for the securities dealers, there's the IOSCO framework. If you take a step back, Madam Speaker, and unemotionally assess the financial sector, you will conclude that our financial sector is at a more secure place based on many different factors. However, Madam Speaker, when I speak with the industry members, they point to several reforms that the government can do to have the sector produce more without unnecessarily increasing its risk. That said, Madam Speaker, I've gathered a list of reforms that the financial sector has been asking for. And the segment of the financial sector to which I speak are the securities dealers, life insurance companies, and pension funds, those supervised by the FSC. So, Madam Speaker, the government will be beginning with a carefully calibrated package of regulatory reforms designed to mobilize pools of local institutional savings from pension funds and the life insurance sector so that they can play a greater yet prudentially governed role in financing infrastructure, housing, energy, and productive private sector investment. These measures are practical, evidence-based, and sequenced to protect financial stability while unlocking capital for growth. Let me start with pensions. The fund held in pensions accounts are long-dated and patient funds, with investors whose return horizons naturally align with the long-term national investment needs. At present, pension funds face a 5% limit of total assets for investment in the equity of private companies. This constraint has materially limited the ability of pension schemes to participate in local corporate and infrastructure financing. Beginning in the new fiscal year, we will begin a process aimed at increasing the percentage of their assets that they can invest in the equity of
Listeners,
private
please
companies.
keep the comment section
We
active
anticipate
and
that
tap the
together with
screen,
the
please.
Financial Services Commission, we will take a small but consequential step to increase the pension fund private asset limit from 5% of total assets to 7.5% of total assets. This represents a measured, reversible step to allow funds to begin reallocating to well-governed private investments that match their long-term liabilities. Subject to supervisory monitoring, and in the absence of any unforeseen adverse consequences, we will complete the second phase of this increase to 10% by April of 2027. Madam Speaker, for an order of magnitude of this shift, as at the end of September 2025, pension funds held approximately $847 billion in invested assets, of which roughly $42.4 billion, based on the current 5% limited, is available for investment in the equity of private companies. Under the first phase of this change, an additional $21.2 billion of long-term capital will be allowed to be invested in private companies. Subject to supervisory monitoring, we will complete the second phase and raise the limit to 10%. Madam Speaker, that would be additional funds. Additionally, Madam Speaker, the pension industry has been asking for completion of phase 2 since I arrived at the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service. And my commitment to the industry is to get phase 2 done. No excuse, but were it not for intervening events of an election and Category 5 Hurricane Melissa, it would have been tabled. I know that further drafting instructions were sent to CPC recently. After this revision, the draft bill will need to go to the Attorney General's chambers, legal reform, and then back to the FSC. There's a companion bill that also needs tax review, TAJ's review. But what I can say to the pensions industry is I remain committed to seeing the passage of phase 2. Madam Speaker, in the area of foreign currency denominated securities issued by locally domiciled issuers, we will also take steps to adjust the limit. At present, pension funds and life insurance companies face a 10% limit for investment in foreign assets. By early in the new fiscal year, working with the FSC and the BOJ, we should be in a position to increase the foreign asset limit for pension funds and insurance company from 10% to 15% of total assets. Together with the regulators, we will simplify the regulations for the assets they are allowed to hold. The BOJ has advised that by June it will make adjustment to the limit and simplify the FX regulation. Of note, Madam Speaker, the additional 5% will be restricted to foreign currency denominated securities issued by locally domiciled issuers. This targeted change, to a large extent, preserves overall caps on external exposure while enabling pension funds to enhance their currency management and invest in high quality local currency, local dollars investment. Madam Speaker, life insurance are another critical source of long-term capital. Under the current interpretation of Regulation 47 of the Insurance Regulation, Insurers may invest in corporate debt only where multiple prescriptive conditions are fulfilled simultaneously. This effectively restricts insurance to publicly listed, rated, and collateralized securities. This de facto exclusion of many otherwise creditworthy domestic issuers constrains insurer investment returns and limits the development of the corporate debt market. Madam Speaker, what does this mean for private companies and the economy in general? It creates a meaningful new source of patient, long-dated, local financing under the two phases, given projected asset growth that can be deployed into corporate expansion, in capital, and project finance. For many mid-sized firms and infrastructure projects that face limited access to long-term bank credit, this represents an alternative funding channel with the potential for longer maturities and more competitive pricing. Madam Speaker, to address this, we will simplify Regulation 47 so that insurers can invest in corporate debt where either of two objective criteria is met. The revised framework will permit investments where instruments are secured by adequate collateral and bear fixed interest, or where instruments are issued, secured, or guaranteed by a solvent company assessed to be investment grade by a recognized rating provider, and that meets a 2 times fixed charge earnings test over the prior 2 years. This change preserves important safeguards while expanding the investable universe and encouraging a deeper domestic corporate debt market. Madam Speaker, these changes will be reinforced by a set of complementary reforms the regulators will advance in parallel. First, we will review the capital adequacy framework for securities dealers in an effort to remove any elements that discourage intermediation in government and high-quality corporate securities. Second, we will introduce a risk-sensitive concentration framework for securities dealers, pension funds, and insurers that place greater emphasis by issuer quality and asset class rather than relying on blunt uniform caps. Third, we will examine the repurchase agreements framework with a focus on allowable assets and eligible collateral. And finally, Madam Speaker, we will look to reform collective investment schemes rules, exploring the efficacy of unit holder limits and liquidity management. Together, Madam Speaker, these measures will strengthen market functioning while protecting savers and policyholders. Taken together, Madam Speaker, these reforms seek to increase the flow of long-term domestic savings into productive investments, deepen our capital markets, improve price discovery and liquidity, and strengthen the capacity of pension funds and insurers to meet long-term obligations. They're aimed at lowering financing costs for infrastructure and private firms. They're aimed at supporting job creation, and they're aimed at contributing to a more resilient, diversified financial ecosystem. Madam Speaker, these proposals reflect a careful balance. We're removing unnecessary constraints that have kept capital idle, while embedding prudent governance and supervisory safeguards that protect investors, policyholders, pensioners, and the broader economy. With these measures, Jamaica will better mobilize its own savings, Madam Speaker, develop priorities, and strengthen the foundation for sustainable growth. Right. Madam Speaker, the reform of the current primary dealers system remains a key strategic objective of the government, as well as a well-functioning primary dealers framework is essential to the continued development of the domestic debt market. The primary responsibility of primary dealers is to act as market makers, facilitating the trading of Government of Jamaica and Bank of Jamaica securities. This role supports secondary market liquidity, improves price discovery, reduces market and refinancing risk for the government, broadens the investor base for government and the Bank of Jamaica securities, and ultimately, Madam Speaker, lowers the cost of funding for the government. During the upcoming fiscal year, the government will continue to engage the BOJ on the introduction of new types of instruments to have a more diverse suite of instruments in the portfolio. The introduction of new instruments is expected to improve liquidity and flexibility, allowing investors to match products to their cash flow needs and risk preferences, while offering the government more competitive funding options. New instruments may also enhance market resilience, stability, and financial depth, contributing again to the development of a robust domestic debt market. Madam Speaker, I know that ordinary Jamaicans who are focused on putting dinner on the table may not be conversant with fixed income trading platforms or the many reforms I have outlined or how it would affect their lives positively. But that is what governments must do: identify friction in the economy and solve it for the benefit of the people. And so, Madam Speaker, our plan is to transform the traditional opaque and fragmented bond markets by centralizing access, automating workflows, and unlocking powerful analytics for all participants. The fixed income trading platforms will establish a centralized and standardized framework for the listing, trading, and management of Government of Jamaica securities. The implementation of the platform is expected to reduce transaction, settlement time, and counterparty risks, and increase participation by both domestic and international investors, thereby broadening the investor base, strengthening price discovery, supporting the development of an efficient yield curve, and enhancing liquidity in the secondary market. Other benefits that are anticipated to be derived from the implementation of the platform are enhanced trading efficiency, transparency, and overall market development within the domestic debt market. To increase secondary market trading, the Government of Jamaica, in collaboration with the BOJ, the Jamaica Stock Exchange, and the Financial Services Commission, intends to launch the fixed income trading platform in very short order, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, all of these reforms that I've outlined for the financial sector have one aim, Madam Speaker, to make the financial sector work better for the Jamaican people and businesses, full stop. Madam Speaker, in the banking sector, the Bank of Jamaica has done a lot of work in its efforts to make it easier to switch bank accounts and compare fees. Jamaicans are expected to find it easier to switch bank accounts and compare fees starting in this year of our Lord 2026, as the Bank of Jamaica moves forward with initiatives to increase competition in the banking sector. I can assure Jamaicans that there are concrete steps aimed at addressing long-standing consumer concerns about banking services. A new comparison website is scheduled for launch this year. The platform will allow consumers to easily compare banking fees, charges, and interest rates across financial institutions. The development of this site has been approved with focus group testing and marketing campaigns planned ahead of its rollout. This initiative, Madam Speaker, is expected to significantly enhance in banking costs. This is anticipated to encourage more competitive deposit pricing, lower funding costs for financial institutions, and improve the transition of monetary policy. This has benefits for government as well as ordinary Jamaicans. For government, this will support more accurate pricing and greater participation in government of Jamaica's domestic debt instruments. We're going to need our local financial sector to come through with low-cost financing for government to help with the reconstruction and to finance the budget for this upcoming year. For businesses and consumers, over time, enhanced consumer confidence, market discipline, and financial innovation is expected to help deepen liquidity and broaden markets. Madam Speaker, in the upcoming fiscal year as well, the Bank of Jamaica intends to roll out a national electronic Know Your Customer platform to streamline and standardize the process of opening bank accounts. It will expand financial inclusion and reduce paperwork. The system will function as a secure, centralized digital gateway for identity verification and customer due diligence, enabling banks to onboard customers more efficiently through a single access point. The initiative is designed to fix existing Know Your Customer processes that the BOJ says are manual, repetitive, costly, and inefficient. This project has reached approximately 50% completion, with vendor selection and implementation planning currently underway. The eKYC utility, Madam Speaker, forms part of Jamaica's wider effort to modernize and digitize its financial infrastructure. Madam Speaker, a modernized and digitized financial infrastructure can significantly strengthen financial markets by improving efficiency, transparency, and liquidity while reducing costs and risks. It is expected to enhance market accessibility, strengthen investor confidence, and ultimately lower borrowing costs for government, for businesses, and customers. Madam Speaker, Jamaicans are attuned to the significant benefit of the government having a rainy day fund, a hurricane fund. We're working to replenish the suite of disaster risk financing instruments to protect against the uncertainty of natural disasters. Accordingly, the government intends to renew the CRIF insurance policy. The government will also maintain savings in the NNDRF, the NDF, and contingency funds, as well as seek to renew contingency credit lines to bolster our risk retention capabilities. The government will also continue to explore other instruments to build structural resilience, thereby mitigating potential damage with a stable outlook. And Fitch at BB- equally with a stable outlook. Madam Speaker, if I were able to get the chart up on the screen, it would show that all the dates for the ratings and the ratings changes are all after the Category 5 hurricane. This is unprecedented. Unprecedented in Jamaica's history. And the people of Jamaica are to be commended for the sacrifices that they have made to have have our international credit rating so aligned?
Here, here.
Confidence of our rating agencies.
Imagine that after a category 5 hurricane. Moody, S&P, and Fitch still have Jamaica's outlook as stable. My goodness, something good is happening in this country. That is absolutely amazing. At the best of times during the 90s, we never had these ratings at all. 53% of your GDP. Yeah? And you still have a stable rating? Wow. Amazing stuff.
And our international partners in Jamaica's credit worthiness. It's not just for investors overseas. It is for us here as well, Madam Speaker. It means we have greater certainty about our economic affairs.
Yes.
Certainty about our economic affairs.
Yes.
Not every country in the world has this kind of certainty that we enjoy in Jamaica.
Yes.
We can wake up and know that if we have money in the bank, we can put our ATM cards in the machine and pull out what we need without asking anybody anything. We know we have the freedom to travel. We don't have to line up if we need some foreign exchange to buy a personal item on a platform halfway around the world. And we have certainty that our children can go to school. Life could be very miserable, Madam Speaker, if Jamaica loses the faith and confidence that the global financial market has in us. We have to guard these ratings and strive to make them better. Madam Speaker, these credit ratings are our oil. They are our gold, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I spent a lot of time on the financial sector reforms, and it is with good reason. We will need the financial sector this upcoming year, the financing gap that we have. If you look at the screen, Madam Speaker, you will see that for the fiscal year, the new fiscal year coming up, we have a budget deficit, a fiscal deficit of $190.6 billion. We also have debt payment, and I'm sorry, there should be a parentheses around those numbers, of $167.6 billion. This gives us a total of $358.2 billion in terms of the total financing gap for this new fiscal year. In order to fund that, Madam Speaker, we will have to borrow $247 billion, and hence my focus on our financial sector and the many reforms to do so that they can easily help us to fund this gap. We have other flows, Madam Speaker, $2 billion, and we will fully close the gap with cash reserves of $103.9 billion. In our medium-term debt management strategy book, we detail for the market when we are likely to be in the market for funding. You will note the issues we plan to reopen and all the associated dates. I know that chart is a little too tiny. Well, in terms of the print, it's too tiny, but it's in our medium-term debt management book. It's all detailed there for the financial sector to see exactly what we will be doing, what dates we plan to do it on, what are the instrument type, and the method of issue. Additionally, Madam Speaker, there's also a page that shows for the fiscal year that we're in, how we will close that in terms of the proposed, the treasury bills that we have done already and those to come for that year. Madam Speaker, before I go to the revenue measures that were laid on the table of Parliament, that's Ministry Paper number 17, I'd like to remind Jamaicans of the history of revenue measures. And if I could get that chart, I'd speak to it. Madam Speaker, if you go back to 2012, you can see that every year, 2012, 2013, 2014, 2015, the PNP government of the day brought 19 billion of tax measures in fiscal year 2012, 15 billion in fiscal year 2013, 7 billion in fiscal year 2014, and 10 billion in fiscal year 2015. When we took over in 2016, with our promise to raise the threshold to 1.5, and we came in, we had to increase taxes, but we also offset those. The increase in the threshold to 1 point offset with taxes. But Madam Speaker, for those looking on, will tell you that it was revenue neutral. Fiscal 2018, 2019, no new net taxes. In fiscal 2020, we gave back taxes. That was the reverse income taxes. In fiscal year 2021, no new taxes. In fiscal year 2022, no new taxes. In fiscal year 2023, no new taxes. Fiscal year 2024, no new taxes. Fiscal year 2025, no new taxes.
Listeners, please tap on the screen and repost the live
This year, this new fiscal year, for the first time, this JLP administration has had to ask Jamaicans to pay more in SCT for cigarettes, non-alcoholic sweetened beverages, more SCT on liters of pure alcohol, more in environmental, and join a share of the digital world, reduction in duty concession allowance and continued distribution from the NHG. This is the first time since 2016 that this government has had to ask Jamaicans to pay new taxes. Madam Speaker, I show this slide to tell our young people, those who are 20 years old and would have been finishing primary school when this administration came to government, that we are the government of no new taxes. You can see on the screen that our track record speaks for itself. In the history of the PNP as government, they cannot make that claim. Sadly, they've come to Parliament year after year after year with more taxes, and more taxes. Madam Speaker, I'll take a few minutes on digital services because that's where most of the questions have come from. Taxing digital services ensures fairness, brings in much needed government revenues, keep our tax laws up to date with how people do business, and make sure big companies pay their share. Digital services taxation is now either in place are being discussed in over 100 countries. Madam Speaker, I want to highlight a phenomenon, not just in Jamaica, but I'm sure in other parts of the world. And it's the silent closure of small retail businesses, given the change that has been happening in terms of our ability to easily order whatever we need online without the requisite taxes. This puts our local businesses or local retailers at a disadvantage. It is not equitable or fair. Our local businesses have to compete with tax-free items. And I want Jamaicans to consider that it's the people who work in these retail shops, these businesses, who are affected when they close. It is the security guard who is no longer needed at the entrance or no longer needed to direct you where to park. It is the cleaning crew that comes in the morning or late at nights that are let go. It is the lease on the building, the electricity and water payments that are no longer made. It is not happening with a loud bang, Madam Speaker, just silently. So the next time you go to a little shop that used to sell little things that you like and it's no longer there, it probably fell victim to items coming in without GCT. Let me hasten to add, though, there's no thought to curtail digital purchases from wherever in the world you wish to buy. You will note you have no trouble getting foreign exchange to make the purchase. I'm simply highlighting a phenomenon that is happening and which, as government, we have to be keyed. Madam Speaker, regarding the request for aligning of the filing and payment dates of annual corporate income tax, I want to say to those who've come to us to have us look at the dates, we're listening, and we ask that you allow us to see the impact of the current dates that we've put forward. TAJ has some concerns that if we change the dates, 2 steps would be involved, but I've asked them to come back to me at the end of the first month, during which this will be implemented, to let me know what the performance has been. But we will assess in the new fiscal year, and we will tell you of our findings. Madam Speaker, I want to say to Jamaicans, capturing our fair share of digital economy revenues is no longer just a good idea, it's essential. It helps diversify our revenue streams so that we are not so reliant on just a few sectors. It brings in much needed funds for schools or hospitals, infrastructure, and yes, for rebuilding after Hurricane Melissa. It ensures fairness. If local businesses pay taxes, so should foreign companies profiting from our market. Madam Speaker, this isn't about creating new burdens. It is about making sure the new digital landscape works for Jamaica, just as much as it works for the giant global companies. We are embracing the future, but ensuring that future is one where Jamaica gets its fair share.
Hear, hear.
Madam Speaker, I've come to the end of my presentation. And as I conclude the fiscal year 2025-26 budget presentation, while I cannot say for the 11th year in a row, no new taxes, I can certainly say no additional revenue measures. I will remind Jamaicans that come April 1, the new threshold takes effect, 1.9 million threshold. And to say to our public sector workers as well, the government's offer remains on the table. So, Madam Speaker, I want to say again to all Jamaicans, you can bank on us. You have seen our performance, and we will take this nation safely through whatever the world throws at us, whatever the climate throws at us. We have the capability, we have the leadership to take Jamaica through any adversity. And so, I want to say thank you to my constituents again, to my family who puts up with long nights, early mornings, gone on weekends, never seeing me. Thank you for your dedication and for your love. Madam Speaker, let me close by saying, may God bless Jamaica, land we love.
All right, so there you have it. The presentation by the Finance Minister in Parliament. So let's have some views on the budget presentation. We have Harry with us, and of course it's 4 minutes now past 8 o'clock. So good evening, everyone, and welcome to Politics Plus. The podcast goes with you until 9 o'clock. We've been here since about 6 o'clock. Today, Jamaica's Finance Minister, Favour Williams, delivered her second budget presentation in Parliament, outlining how the government plans to manage the country's finances for the coming year. Now, budget presentations can sometimes sound like a mountain of numbers. So tonight we're doing something different. We're breaking down the entire budget, focusing on what really matters for Jamaican families, businesses, and the economy. Let's look at the 5 biggest takeaways. I have with me Harry. Good evening to you, Harry.
Evening, neighbor. Night, everybody.
Fantastic. Are you settled at home? Or are you in transit?
In transit, not far off.
Okay.
I'm almost there.
All right, no problem. Just take your time. All right, so let's get some review from this. The nationwide team had some discussions on that. Let's see if we can hear a little bit from them.
Bombastic nature of much of her predecessors. She kept on message, kept on point. Do you think that the presentation in terms of...
All right, so I'm
to discuss and analyze what was said by the minister. We have with us President of the Jamaica Manufacturers and Exporters Association, Catherine Silvera, Senior Lecturer of Economics at the University of the West Indies, Mona, Dr. Christine Clark, Senior Tax Manager for the JN Group, Everald Dua, and Social Political Commentator Newton Harris. And joining us on Zoom, Tax Expert and Managing Director at A. Peart Advisory Services, Alison Peart. And just to kick off things with you, Newton Harris, because you said something which I think is important. You said that this speech was very measured. It lacked the bombastic much of her predecessors. She kept on message, kept on point. Do you think that the presentation in terms of how it is
courtesy of Nationwide? Thank you, Nationwide. Okay, great.
Absorbed by the average listener benefits from that or suffers from that?
I think it benefits. I think from a young person's perspective, we grew up in an era where we're hearing about tax measures that made a lot of people nervous. When tax time, our parents, we could feel the tenseness when a new budget was about to drop. And so for us, the lack of the excitement or the anxiety is a relief. Particularly for those of us who are facing new taxes for the first time in either 8 or 10 years, depending on how you look at it.
And she pointed that out, that many Jamaicans growing up now, 20 years on, would not even have realized that many of these tax measures would be coming.
Absolutely. And so we remember the time when Minister Clark had brought the tax measures of the past, and it had gone around Parliament several times and it had reeled them up. We are very happy as young people that there is not much excitement and there is not much, and that furthermore, not that there's just not excitement, but that we're not negatively impacted by tax measures. Usually when we hear taxes, we think of something oppressive, we think of something for which we're going to have to dig into places that we would rather not.
The lessening of the disposable income.
Thank you. So we are quite relieved that there is not much excitement, whether it's positive or negative, and that these are measures that are not really going to pose a serious challenge for us.
I'd like for us to go around the table on that thought, Siobhan, because it's one of the points, and when we ask folks to grade, it's really about the delivery. But is that really, should we be moving away from that, Catherine Silvera? Should we be moving away from that and focus on the substance of what's being said?
I think definitely that we need to be focused on the substance of what is being said, but we also need to make sure that it is being said in a way that the average Jamaican is going to understand what it is. And so I think using examples are very important, using the PowerPoint to enunciate the high key points of the speech. That's very important, I think, because the average Jamaican needs to, understand what the finance minister is saying and not make it so highly economical that it might fly over the average Jamaican.
Do you think she achieved that today?
I think that she did a very fair job. I think there could have been some more use of examples, yes.
How about you, Christine Clark?
Well, I think this is a good place to be, to have this discussion now, to say that in essence, our Minister of Finance has bored us, which is not what we're saying, but it's good to know that we've overcome, for those of us older than the 20 years, overcome what we would have gone through and be at a point where a Minister of Finance could open a budget debate and close it and everybody's like, that's it, there's nothing more. She just came to the end and it was done. She didn't have to kind of go over the litany of the negatives that we would have gotten accustomed to, and then this is why we're doing the taxes. We are seeing these tax measures or revenue measures, as she prefers to refer to them, in response, I think, to Melissa. In a way, I actually think perhaps they're hoping not to collect from the sugary tax, right? They're actually hoping that perhaps this will spur some innovation, whether in the private sector, MSMEs, to say, well, listen, we have all of these crops. What can we make with them? What are our alternatives? Can we, leverage the education ministry's thrust to expand STEM to see what can we do with all of these things that we have naturally just growing around. Can we use?
All right, so we are carrying you the Nationwide's cover story as they analyze the minister's presentation. Stay tuned. Our own Harry will have further comments on this just after this. All right, so let's go back to Nationwide and hear what they had to say as they, had some comments on the minister's presentation.
Use those in a way that would build up our STEM base, but also translate into healthier outcomes. These taxes are part of, I think, the WHO's move to have countries increase the taxes, the prices of these goods to the final consumer by 50%. So the tobacco, the alcohol, and the sugar. So it's part of a global thrust that Jamaica is basically joining in on finally, I think, by 2035. So this is probably a new dimension in our approach to fiscal policy, which I think the market hopefully will view as positive. Nothing to trigger anything except, as I said, the financial sector particularly is probably scrambling now to say, okay, how are we going to attract some of these pension funds? How are we going to maybe adjust our operating model to accommodate this new EKYC framework? What could it look like? How might it make us more innovative and have more to unlend as intermediaries with, the MSMEs, the big companies, the small, and hopefully, as Alison said, for the domestic entrepreneur, how can we get more of them into a full-fledged operations, leveraging all of the possible financial outcomes? Because this is one of the things, the binding constraints, I think, to businesses.
Driver of economic growth as well.
Right, exactly.
Need that sector to perform well. Alison Beard, I'd love to bring you in on that point about this sector that we've grown so accustomed to, and particularly because she comes to the wicket at a point, Alison Beard, where we're still recovering from a devastating category 5 people in absolute shambles. So one would think the Minister of Finance would need to be a bit more sober and not be given to the spectacle at this particular time as well. How do you see it, Alison Beard?
Well, there's been a change. My colleague Evra loves excitement. I have an excitable personality, so I like calm. What she has done, which I think we need to notice, normally, today would be the day that we get the tax measures. We normally bungle up into Parliament, and this discussion today would be about the revenue measures, the application of GCT and digital services, and the 20-year-old young people will be saying, what do you mean? Are you going to tax my downloads? What are you going to do? By having that discussion and tabling it on February 12th, it's almost as if today you're listening to see if that would change or any more would come. So I think part of the dulling of the excitement is because we heard the revenue measures already. So now we're put in a sense of, okay, what is she going to come with? Are we going to clarify? Are we going to let us not lose sight, though? We need more information on, and we have to be careful on terminology. You hear me talking about our domestic entrepreneur. I say that as somebody that migrated and returned. I wouldn't have left. My mom would not have left if there were opportunities in Jamaica. As a product of a slave, I want to make sure that my ancestors didn't die in vain, and that in Jamaica, we are giving our inner city, our Jamaican children, something to strive for. No, let me be blunt. I love investments from everybody. But when I lived overseas, the incentives went to the people from the country. I was always asked, were you born here? Where's your local experience? You got things to drive the local people. So I want us to make sure that we're not focused on foreign direct investment, attracting investment, ignoring the people to migrate, the people who, like myself, came here off a slave ship.
All right, so we're going to go to Harry now. Give us a half a minute or so. All right, Harry, are you there, sir?
Your neighbor.
Yeah, yes, so Harry. Tell us. What are the main features that you would want to highlight? Anything that was not said by these analysts, and what would your take be on today's presentation from the Minister of Finance?
Well, for starters, neighbor, I thought it was very calculative, right? And very strategic. And why I say it's very calculative is that because the quote unquote new taxes were already, eased in to Jamaica from February. We have this thing where, the hype goes away. The focusing on saying, yes, this is a 9-day talk. And because we were prompted before, it didn't come as a shock going into a new financial year. So we got eased into it a little. So that helped. It was a little bit more palatable listening, and also it became a lot easier to follow this budget debate. It's actually one of the first I've listened to. And this could be recency bias, but it's one of the easier budget.
This is one of the first you have
follow.
listened to?
To follow. Like you could actually follow right through without being lost in some of what is being said. And that I think is something I would have graded at a high level. Because
I was shocked, quite frankly, Harry, to see my listeners listening to the finance minister for more than an hour and a half as we played her here. And they stayed. What a fantastic thing that is. Did you notice that?
Definitely, neighbor, right?
Yes.
In fact, I re-listened with you guys to see if I missed anything. So I actually like that about it.
Yes.
And the other part why I like it is that it's coming from, as we call her, Auntie Faval.
Yes, and hold on, Harry. You remember that budget presentations in Jamaica normally go on for 3-4 hours, up to 5 hours, sir. This was just under 2 hours. Concise.
Yeah, but when I saw that it started a little late, I was like, all right, this might run us to like 7 o'clock, because we're expecting something of this sort to move things around. But it was one that was already almost as if we knew everything that was there. And this alludes to the preparation process that we've gone through from 2016 to now. Yes. Because if I'm supposed to give this budget debate thus far a title, I would say Stabilizing Jamaica.
You would call it Stabilizing Jamaica.
I would, because
one of the things that struck me, Harry, is that it appears as if the work that Nigel Clark did was to move away the encumbrances, the blockages out of the way, to lay a foundation. So it becomes much easier to craft a budget in Jamaica now because of the economic conditions the country is into. Do you get that feeling?
It has, and it followed suit, because one of the things I know persons won't point out, and I know the analysts from Nationwide may not have had the time to see this, but in this budget reading, if you take a look at it, barring the fact that we're stable and having the Melissa to handle, every year thus far, for the last 5 years that I can recall, a sector or section of Jamaica and its people got returns from the government. And let me break it down. The year before, 2 years ago, we had the threshold announcement. So those persons who earns lower than a certain amount, that comes up. So you get back something put in your pocket. Right after that, the pensioners got relieved. And then when you look at it, there was also business persons. So every year, a part of Jamaicans got something. And because of that now, everybody now come up to this debate and look, are we going to be hit? We are getting no anything. Like everybody over time would have gotten something back, some form of benefit, and not taken away. And that is the beauty of not having no new taxes for such a long time. In fact, chart showed that we got back $15 billion put back to the people, and I think another year of about 10 to 13 billion. So those things leading up to now actually coined and set the tone for this debate. Additionally, what it did is that because Melissa happened, we expected a lot of movements into a lot of borrowing, but that was not so. In fact, what is being done is that we're leveraging a sector of Jamaica that is critical. And why I say it's critical, we all know what it is, the financial sector. The man-made disaster is what put us here, and that happened in where? The financial sector. Now, there's a lot of things that needs a little more wiggle room. It needs to free up because of how stable we are now. And one of the major things that came out to me, neighbor, was you see that pension fund and insurance assets being freed up? Because people don't understand, this is almost $900 billion that sits there, that is not active. It would be almost like you have that, and I'm not calling that savings account, but think of it as a savings account, just sitting there, not really generating anything, no risk, no real yield. And you know that there are so many opportunities to maximize this money, not at high risk, right? But you know it can be doing so much. And that is one of the things that pointed out. And that is how you help the sector, right? Now, pension funds increasing by 50%. You can't have almost $900 billion there, neighbor, and only $40 billion technically trying to do something. It doesn't work, especially in the climate that we are. You have to let that local money that is locally, let it work here. And one of the analysts would have spoken, I think it's Crystal, would have alluded a little to it. And I like that because you want the money here to stimulate the growth. And that does a whole lot more because you're not only let that money make money or drive your growth. In order to do that, what it does, it allows you to invest in Jamaica, and you are Jamaican, so you have a greater pride, and also you have less reason to try and get foreign currency. You build from within, and that is what great nations do. You don't have to rely. Far too long, we always hear, when we think of investment, we think of overseas people having to invest. No, money there, Jamaica. But it's just that it is not being directed to flow and cause production and productivity. And that was what was taken out in the 90s. And this is the one way how to put it back and put us back on our feet at a higher level. So I love that part about it.
Okay. Let's help our listeners here do a little. We want to look at five of the biggest takeaways from the budget. And we'll take your calls just around 8:45 or so, listeners. Be patient with us. Firstly, Harry, the size of the budget, $1.26 trillion, a lot of money. The headline number, the national budget is about $1.26 trillion. That money is divided mainly into two categories: the recurrent spending and the capital spending. Would you mind explaining to us those two terms? The recurrent spending, what is that?
You hearing me, neighbor?
Yeah, man, we're hearing you.
Okay. So with the recurrent spending, neighbor, these are what we call technically your overhead costs, right? So these are predictable numbers, anything that you always have to do. So for example,
day-to-day government operations.
Right. So like your public sector salaries, utility bills, these that I call them fixed, even though they're not fixed, because they're predictable. You know that you have to pay these. So in a household, you have to get the picnic lunch money. You have to pay JPS, your light bill, those things. That is recurring.
Oh, okay. And then you have the capital spending, which is what now?
So the capital spending is one in which you use to try and, drive growth. So you look in terms of to maintain possibly like long-term assets from the government, property, buildings, those kind of things, anything that can sustain operation and drive growth. And that is one of the things this government has been rather good at doing, because they know that that is what you use to move your country and not necessarily taking debt that doesn't give back.
Only 62 billion I see here though, Harry, for capital investment projects. A little low this year?
I don't think it is. And I'll say why. What we're moving away from, neighbor, is looking for the government to always be the one to do this growth. No real country that grows exponentially or have stable and consistent growth looks to the government to drive this. What you look to the government is to maintain the infrastructure and improve infrastructures.
Yes.
But in terms of what drives that growth, because government is not in this for profit. No government is, right? Any government you see trying to make profit, then something is wrong, right? Now, you pivot to the private sector because they are the ones who can build out the financial sector, which heavily, in terms of capital expenditure, the financial sector has to be the one to take care of that, because what? They're in it for profit. So they will build faster. The funds will spread out. It will move around the economy a lot better and a lot more sustainably. And that is one of the things that the government is looking to do, because this budget, we have to keep in mind as well, neighbor, that 2.4 billion US dollars from the 6.7 billion package will be going to the private sector. So the government now doesn't necessarily need to try and be the one to fund that. So they're moving away from it in that way to try and do it. In fact, I did the announcement, I think, a sewage plant, waste plant treatment that the government is divesting.
Yes.
They're actually releasing it from their portfolio. And I want the listeners to remember that when the government was releasing their last percentage of Trans Jamaica, the opposition said no, because they wanted to just be getting the dividends coming in every year, because they saw it as just cash coming in, but not as driving growth. And that is what this government is looking to do. They don't want to be the one that you rely on to do these things, because they can't do it at the magnitude it requires. And this is why the PSOJ is so heavily linked and always in these discussions. And that is a beautiful thing, because you get those technocrats, you get those persons with network globally and regionally who have the know-how, who have networking, who can drive and pull onto other things. Because what? Those persons will never, and anybody who goes into business don't look to make a loss. And that is what the government is looking to empower the people, empower the business minds. And this is the thing, those 44,000 businesses that we lost back then, this is what it should have been doing. And the government is reinstating that. And I want the people to understand. It's not necessarily me trying to bash you each time, but to give you the idea and to let you understand what we're trying to put back that was missing, and it has been missing from Jamaica for a while.
Okay, so the Jamaica is financing more of the budget from taxes, not borrowing. One of the biggest themes in the minister's speech is fiscal discipline. Would you explain to our listeners what does that mean?
So to be in terms of fiscal discipline, neighbor, it is one in which, based on your decision as a minister, as a